My name is Karen White. I'm one of the directors at AEHA and a co-founder. Over there with Burgundy shirt on is Troy Marshall. He handles all of our IT work. The younger and his GIS and anything else that technically we need assistance with. There's a little difference in our ages, so as you get to a more mature point in life, you want to rely on younger people who have more expertise. So the very youngest helper we have here today is Miss Lula Catherine Elliott in the back. And this is her first volunteer program since we have moved from the Plains to Warrenton. She's also my granddaughter. In the sweater with the glasses on in the back is our collection manager, Norma Logan. She is bashful, but she's efficient in the work that she does. Over here we have one of our volunteers that has been with us many, many years, Lisa Richards. She has worked on numerous projects, and she just keeps coming back, so we just keep opening the doors, and she's just part of AEHA. Angela Davidson, there is a board member, my sister, and she's been a founding board member, is a founding board member. I'm not going to go through every single person in here, but quite a few of them I could. Now, in the Burgundy blouse, Charlotte Butts is another volunteer, and she has worked on two particular projects, one being the Southern Plains and the other being the 1850 and 1860 U.S. slave schedule. Those documents and the abstracts of African-American names from those have gone into the Know Thy Names project, which Troy and others have been building and working on over the years. We are delighted that you are all here today, and this room is full of people with interpersonal relationships. In the back here, we have a young lady with a black shirt on, and she has a beautiful smile, Jada Hill. She just graduated from Liberty High School. She was an intern with us last summer, and she is back with us a couple of days a week this year. So we are very, very happy. Now, I think I've gotten through most of those things. This year, to expand on Know Thy Names project and DA 250, we have been working and looking out towards the community to see how we interconnect. A lot of this happened back just around COVID. Would you say COVID time, Jim? Around COVID time. That was an article about a work that we did working with PEC on a story map. Too many maps, but our mapper is back there. But they ran an article in the newspaper, and a gentleman came through to see us at the place and said, I think I can help with this project. He didn't come alone, he came with a bag with books in it. So who knows if we want to know what's in the bag. What was in the bag were journals and account books from his ancestors. And he spread them across the table, and as we go through, we started picking up names of people free and enslaved, names of even our relatives. And from that, and working with another gentleman by the name of Mark Borstrom, Know That Names soon had the name, because we had multiple databases everywhere, from every type of record source we could put our hands on, we'd abstract the Afro-American names out. Wanted to know the names of the people buried at Old Whitewood, in the Plains. It became the mission of Mark Borstrom to find the names of the African-Americans that were buried on his property. And Jim Strickland wanted to be of assistance to help build out these stories of African-Americans who often were unrecorded. They had names, but they weren't recorded. And when they were recorded, sometimes it was only a given name, and sometimes it was just a reference with an adjective as far as a female or a wench or something of that nature. So without further ado, Jim Strickland's in the back, and he is another volunteer that has been with us for years, and we so appreciate him being here. So today, from the work that we're doing, we received an email from a gentleman, and I'm not going to go into all of those things, but I'm going to introduce you to the speaker, and he's going to do his own introductions. He's going to talk a little bit about one of the resources that we house. We don't always have original manuscripts. Sometimes we have copies and or abstracts of original pieces of work. This gentleman was interested in some work, and we were able to give him a little assistance along the way. And today you're going to hear more about what he has been doing and work and the people that he's been working with. I present to you Andrew LaRowe.
I want to tell you, in the next 45 minutes, I'm going to get 17 things wrong. My wife went ahead and let me know while Sarah sitting right here. Yeah. I misspelled Thomas.
That's on page 1.
It's terrible because I did it this morning when I woke up in the hotel. And I slept in the Holiday Inn last night, and I woke up dumb. I can't even spell Thomas' term. But, well, I'm Andrew LaRowe, and I am not related to anyone in this room but Sarah Herbert, Sarah Albritton now. And by that relationship, opened up some doors for me. I told somebody a moment ago, I've been studying family history my whole life. I come from a family of Quakers. They just don't do anything very much. They go to church, they don't speak. They really haven't. William Penn makes some really good history, but other than that, it's just been kind of oh-hum. And I got kind of bored with it. And then when I had the good fortune to marry Sarah, her family is the most history-bound bunch of people I've ever seen, because they go all over the place. And so I got involved studying her history, and then ended up in the Tomas Turner Association with several people. Several of our board members are in the room. So I kind of got a story to tell. And I'm really serious about that, getting some things wrong. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of potential here. So if you do hear me make mistakes, you'll just write it on a little slip of paper and give it to me on my way out the door. I'll try to remember that. And I'll introduce myself as we go along. I don't think I need to stop. Y'all kind of already got me. I really wanted to start here. This is the older version of Whitman Carter Turner. The 22-year-old version of him wrote these words in 1839, right after his dad died. His dad was in charge of Kinloch. And I'm going to read some of this aloud. I got cheat sheets, so I'll use that. On this day, it is that I undertake the management of the Kinloch estate. It says sufficient confidence has been placed in me to entrust into my hands there the performance of duties so important. I trust in God that I never may be found remiss or lacking of attention to those duties, but my perseverance and industry to be enabled to accomplish them with judgment and good order. I trust also that my management may give entire satisfaction to my dear mother, and my general course of conduct give pleasure to all with whom I may be anywise concerned. God, you're right. And I have to think of, his day after his death, he's known all along that given his family. I keep some water on here, by the way. I've kind of got that campaign trail loose in my voice right now. I have a project going, and I've been speaking to boards of education every night, it seems, and starting to lose my voice a little bit. We'll hang in there with it. But I just have a great deal of respect for him and what he accomplished and what he left us with his fantastic Diaries. There's another one that I want to jump ahead and read because it's my anthem somewhat. Something that he was in Salem. Some people know that by another name. And at a meeting to talk about the Manassas Gap Railroad. And he had prepared a speech. And we know that speech because he wrote the entire speech into his diaries. But when he wasn't a registered person to speak, so when the time came, he raised his hand so that he could be allowed to give his speech. And he stood up. He says, I attempted to make a speech which I had irregularly prepared for the occasion. That was bold. It was really good. I was a good deal alarmed at getting up without being called, which together with my nature, childlike, foolish diffidence, produced a flood of embarrassment which swept over me like an avalanche, scattering all my ideas and even depriving me of the power of utterance. I feel like that sometimes. Modesty and certainty, as it has always been regarded, a heavenly virtue that diffidence and all-confounding, overwhelming bashfulness is one of the greatest curses which human nature can be afflicted. And I remember when I read that, 7th grade, Mrs. Olson's class doing a book report. I don't know if anybody can remember their 7th grade book report, but nobody could see. My legs were shaking and I was trembling and I couldn't get a word out. This guy comes back the next week and nails it. Well, look at Ted Turner a lot. He's holding this thing up. He nailed it.
The stage.
He nailed it. His speech on the need for the Manassas Gap Railroad and their community in Virginia, one of the first railroads anywhere, was amazing. If he had given a campaign talk on infrastructure in these modern day times, he couldn't have done any better, explaining why that was necessary. I want to talk about that book. I'll get it wrong. Virginia Museum of History and Culture. Is that right? It's written up there. I hope it is. What a thrill. This guy wrote in this book and several others for 25 years. Every day, every morning and every night. I know it's every morning and every night because a lot of times he would say, this morning it was raining, or woke up to snow, or whatever. But then the rest of the paragraph is, we cut grass, we harvested wheat, these things happen during the day, you know. And he mentioned every little detail. Always started with the weather, almost always. He'd start with what the temperature was, whether it was raining or not, and then he would follow up with, it's a good thing because we need it, or it's a bad thing because we have too much. He would always have some sort of editorial about the weather. Then he would write about what was going to happen that day, or what happened that day. Mostly an accounting of farming. He was a progressive farmer, a very good farmer. And he would talk about what they were going to do that day. He had a lot of help. I'll mention it throughout the talk. But he had enslaved people that ran that farm, that built that farm. They cleared the land for him. That did everything. And he would say we, but he would mention his people that worked in the fields and everything by name in his diaries. He would talk specifically about people and what they did and how well they did it. And the details are astounding of the things that he wrote about. And it changed. 22-year-old Edward Carter Turner doing such a beautiful job of taking over an enormous job of running this farm. And putting in all of the account, how much money he was paid for something, how much money he had to pay for something. They didn't do a lot of cash transactions back then. They had accounts. So there was nobody writing checks, there was nobody even giving somebody money, but every so often, when they settled their account. And that allowed him to send his enslaved workers, hitch up a wagon full of grain, and drive 2 days by themselves to Alexandria on some not very good roads and not very good conditions. Sometimes it took 3 days. Go to the place that's been prearranged, probably been there several times, and unload a harvest, and also get a receipt for it, and then go over across town somewhere and prearrangement to pick up supplies, to pick up all the things that they couldn't make at Kinloch, various types of food. And some more about that a little bit later. And then 2 days back in a wagon full of supplies. And then some of them, there were several that were wagoners, would go back and forth all the time. Get back and go straight to Chatham's, Beverly Chatham. Say Beverly first?
Chatham.
Thank you. I need a little participation in the army. I spell Thomas. So sometimes they just get back, load up, and go again, stay on the road all the time. It wasn't an easy life. That's my best friend sitting with me. Could about make me cry. They brought that book out and said, "We need gloves." I said, "No, we don't use gloves anymore. Gloves cause more trouble than they solve." So we don't need it. There's other donated diaries there that they won't bring out. They'll give you a picture of it. The students become too little. They just put your hands on it, looking at that handwriting. I don't know if I can remember the name of it, but there's a little, it's got a name or something in it. It's a shirt cuff, a pointed finger, and whenever he felt like something was really important, he would draw that little hand with a finger pointing at it. I mentioned it. Ted and I worked together on this and talked about Ted a little bit more in a minute. And I called him up and then I said, "Hey, you know what? It'd be really cool if we put this in the book." Well, the book was done. It was getting ready to go to the publisher. And I said, "Is there a chance that we can put just a couple of them just to do that?" And this guy just, what the heck? He went through every single date that had one of those hands and had one that he selected and put it in the whole book. So if you get a chance to get the book, you can page through there and you got a little bit of help of seeing what's most important. I use these slides a little bit, not so much for y'all, but for me. I feel like I've been talking long enough. I changed the slide and I know where I'm supposed to be going. I wanted to mention that this is not the Tomas, but the Thomas Turner Association of Virginia. But many of the people in this room, maybe even some of the people in this room were in that picture. Is that possible? Is anybody in that picture? Okay. Well, that's at Kinloch in 1948. The association started in 1947. So So as you see, this is their second Turner family reunion. What some of the board members and some of the people in here are today is the Thomas Turner Association of Virginia. And I have to look up and see 501c3 because I always want to say 401k and two different things. but we're very fortunate. We have a good group of people that work very hard. Some have worked very hard for a long time. Lisa Turner sitting back here, and she's been the treasurer for life. And she just recently retired, but we're real thankful that all the time she's been doing that. And then Ted Turner over here with your batteries that go down low. She beat it up. Ted is our president, and he wanted me to be president, and so I wouldn't be out, but I'd be his vice president. So whenever we open up the meetings, I just remember to be quiet, so we get things done. So just a bit more about, they underwrote the cost of getting the book published. We had donations come in from a lot of folks, some people that are in this room, that covered the cost. It was work still to be done. There had been a lot of work done already, but a lot of things needed to be transcribed. You heard something a little while ago about the Southern Plains, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But we had to transcribe the Southern Plains we got from the National Archives. And I think a couple different people have done that, but we were able to get that done to the point where we could get into the book. But we have a lot of other projects that are underway. We've actually been working with Andrew LaRowe at Kinloch, who's the owner of Kinloch, and we have an agreement that we can work on restoring the Kinloch Cemetery, which is not going to be a small project. So, but there's people that are working on that. A little bit more about the Thomas Turner Association. There's the old man himself up there, Colonel Thomas Turner II, 1689, 1758. That's the front of our website. Got a little information written about that. I put our web address up there. That is the cover page for our database. And we have had the good fortune to have Ted, and especially a man that just recently passed, named John Marshall. Yep, John Marshall. I don't know if anybody in the room knows John, but he is the direct descendant of John Marshall, the Supreme Court Justice. But he and Ted were responsible for putting 11,000 names in this database. 11,000 people that are related. And not like Ancestry.com, my go-to, until I did this thing. They have rules to follow. So you can't just put something in there because it looked good. You can't have somebody that was born, after they had children. The kind of things that can happen. So we have a coding system that how accurate something can be. If you want to get into that, there's a place in there where you just send an email. That email comes to me. I give you rights to get into it, and it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun way to proceed. In that database, I wanted to prove to people that I do have a right to be here. Yes, because I married her. And she's related not necessarily to him, but to the guy on top. And then Edward Turner's sister, Susan Baines Turner, is in our family's run. We'll talk about it more, but Beverly's and Turners live next door to each other. And so they all grew up with each other, and whenever they had a chance, they married each other, it seemed like. So, we've got plenty of people that, it's really interesting to me that Edward Carter Turner and his wife, Sarah Beverly, go back one notch. I'm going to get into the book here in a minute, but I just want to make sure that we know what an achievement that was. And a whole lot of people, some people in this room, right arms, certainly Ted. If I leave anybody out, I'm the least, by the way. I did the cover, and I wrote about a couple of things, and I kept trying to keep him moving when he'd slow down. But we owe everything to Ted, really, for getting the book done. You know, and so I just want to ask for a round of applause. So, yeah, I was just talking about that. I love this. He basically says that the way that he writes his entries, October 21st, 1839. Weather still thick, and occasionally some rain. I sowed some, and that word plaster, got to look that up. It's fertilizer. It's how at that particular time you would go to the mills and they would what's the mineral? Gypsum. And make that as a fertilizer. Upon the wheat and Keeble still, every field was named. Benson, the tenant at Cedar Grove, comes up to see me, and I'm renting the place another year. I give him no satisfaction to hear from Dr. Mason. On this day, I'm married to Sarah Beverly, a lady to whom I've been engaged in, with whom may heaven grant me the life of happiness. Next entry, the next day, is he sows some wheat. You know, it's like their whole idea, their whole concept of this never mentions, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they had 7 or 8 children. Not any mention of it in the Diaries. You know, you think at least Sarah had a baby today. I will tell you this though, before this day, every time he went on a horseback ride with her, he was beaming and talking about, how much fun they had watching the sunset and that kind of thing, something that we know more about. So I wanted to get a little bit of where's this all happening. Most of you that Kathy in the room live on this map somewhere. But this particular 1863 version of Fauquier County, if we look up the far left, you would see Salem, and Salem Marshall, see Warrenton, where we're at now, see Thoroughfare Gap, you see the Plains, and it's just so interesting to me that back in the day, if you own property, you probably had your name on the map. In this case, if you look up right next to the Plains, there's E.C. Turner and Robert Berry. And not long after that, Selby came along, and there would have been another thing there. But they're bordering right there at the Plains. That I've seen several different values on it, but I've seen that the original purchase was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 acres of prime farmland in Virginia. So certainly worth coming to. But that's where it's at. And then I wrote this one in. If we're not used to looking at old maps, we look at a new map and say, oh, I get it. There's 66. So it's a little bit better look at where Kinloch and Andrew John Beverly Mill are all kind of situated on a modern map. I'll talk a little bit about that mill, more in the context of it was one of many mills. There were different mills for different things, and it was for a farming enterprise then. Edward Carter Turner wrote, he raised every kind of grain crop you can imagine, raised livestock, raised sheep for wool and for food. I'll leave that for a moment. But this is an older picture of that building that everybody's used to seeing, you know, and it has a history of being burnt down or catching on fire, and the last time was, I think, got it heavily damaged by arson in 1998, resulting in the roof and the internal mechanics of the floor being destroyed. What a shame. What a magnificent building and a magnificent history that it had. Built in 1742. It was Chapman's mill for the longest period of time, and then eventually it was sold to Robert Beverly in 1876. Played a crucial role in the Civil War. It was a meat curing distribution center operated by the Confederates. Confederates later burned the mill to prevent the Union from obtaining resources. In 1862, the Battle of Fauquier County took place in and around that mill. I wanted to put it in soon because I wanted to look at my timer, by the way. Oh, I'm done. Any questions? Oh, I said, I never started. I'll finish up. I've got a couple more things to say. Anybody needs a break, let me know. But I put it on there because I was so interested in the fact that it was such a part of their daily lives with enslaved workers constantly going to the mill, getting the grain milled, picking up grain, picking up flour or wheat or whatever. And so I wanted to kind of feature it a little bit in his current state. But I wanted this picture because that track, it comes right conveniently right beside that mill. That's the Mississippi Railroad. It's the same bed, and you know, some people might think it's even the same. It's still used today. I think it's at Northern Pacific. I'm not sure. It comes by somebody's house every day. After we what that is. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that side of Edward Carter Turner, because what he did to make that Manassas Gap Railroad happen was enormous. I don't think I have a slide that represents it, but, well, I mean, you do. Oh, that's it. We'll leave that for a minute. He and Robert Beverly teamed together and rode on horseback to raise $20,000 to make up the $80,000 that they had to pay in Fauquier County for that railroad that happened. They had all agreed that that's how much they would pay. There were some people that were trying to run the railroad up from Middleburg and kind of got shot down on it. So it wasn't a practical route to take, and they were doing it for, you know, if there's any relatives that those people in their day, they were good people trying to do a good thing, but they weren't going to have none of it. So they went by horseback and raised that $20,000 and then some, convincing people that we got to do this. This business of a 5-day round trip and a broken down wagon for a few barrels isn't going to last much longer once everybody gets hold of the fact that we can just have a train car pull up next to the mill and fill it up. So it was an enormous thing that they did, and it showed the side of him that he was a community leader. And I've skipped the whole part here, but I realize that I'm a little long-winded, so I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about the fact that it was a progressive farm. And if you look at the Kinloch Farms website today, the biggest thing on it is the progressive farmers. Their attention to farming for healthy, for health, people that have healthy food is I think, is in the soil at Kinloch. This guy was, he was using fertilizer when other people weren't. He was getting better crop yields. All of his fields looked better. He brags about it in his daily entries. I looked around and mine looks best. And then he discovered one of the first people in the area that started using the wine. Everybody, who doesn't know what that is? Gives me a chance to cuss. It's bird feces. Some people think it's only bat feces or droppings, but it's birds in general. And the thing that happened is amazing to me. When they figured out that it would make good fertilizer, and they started having the ability for shipping companies to go down to South America, to go to Peru, to go to places where there was an abundance of bird droppings, and load them up, put them on ships, bring them up to Alexandria, Virginia. When you drop off your grain, you pick up your wine. And you learn that what I pay for that is a little bit more, but what it does is a whole lot more. And so he was one of the first people that tried that out. As I researched it, I found something that I thought was a little interesting, very sad. There were people getting rich shipping it, and there were people probably getting rich or making a good living with plantations that were growing crops using it. But on both ends of that equation, there were people, indentured Chinese servants, that were working in conditions that were so bad. I mean, just think of the nature of what they're doing, and then add just intense heat and conditions that they were in, and the substance is toxic, causes disease from histoplasmosis. I know that because I'm a facilities administrator for public school systems, and when we have bats in the attic, I'm not talking about old teachers, but when we have a situation like that, children can get sick just because they're there. They don't have to come into contact with it. Can you imagine shuttling it all day and wheelbarrowing it into barrels and into ships? And then what's on the other side of the equation? Our enslaved African workers are the ones that are picking it up in Alexandria, bringing it back, and spreading it on the fields. I never really looked at it that way until just recently I realized that, well, what an injustice it is. What a horrible thing to do, particularly for people's livelihoods and their health. And of course, they weren't free. They didn't have any choice in that. They had to do it. Kind of get to a place here where I got a picture of the back of that mill. Where's Georgia? I wish you'd have one at the front, right? But the day I was standing there, our kids were all standing just to the right. But Avenel is still there. It's still in the family. And very much appreciated by all of us. And very much appreciation to Georgia Herbert for her stewardship of this wonderful historic property. So, yeah, how about some applause for Georgia? And that's Sarah's little grandbaby and her daughter. And so that's Robert Beverly. Is that little girl's eighth great grandfather. So when I saw the picture, it struck me that Robert Beverly built that floor. And and that many generations down, that little girl doesn't have any idea of the heritage that the legacy that she's standing there with. But we do, and we're not going to forget it. She's part of this family. So that's Kinloch today. That's the modern home that Andrew LaRowe lives in. And maybe that's actually not today, is it, Ted? It's an older picture of the modern building. I think it's even fancier than that now. We all were able to go there on a recent family reunion. I have talked about the Civil War. A good portion of the book is about the Civil War. We were missing some volumes of the Diaries, but when they started back up again, the 1862 and the 1863 Diaries are heartbreaking. He quit talking about the weather. He wrote long passages every day about how horrible it was to have this happening in their front yard, right where they're at. I'm actually going to look at my notes so that I don't get something wrong. And here it is. So, Charles Hill Carter of Shirley Plantation, born 1732 to 1806, was the great-grandfather of Edward Carter, and grandfather to Robert E. Lee. So it put a situation together where Robert E. Lee, Thomas Turner, was his guardian. And I won't go into it and try to go into all the circumstances that caused that to happen with Robert E. Lee's death, not being around. But that meant that Robert E. Lee, in a sense, grew up at Kinloch. He went to Eastern View for his education, but a lot of his days growing up, being a young man, were spent at Kinloch and at Avenel. You've got stories at Avenel of Robert E. Lee peeling peaches on the back porch during the night before Second Manassas. And couriers running up on horses and giving him information and stuff. So it's a rich history. Look here, in Luna. It's grandma. I could stop by and gave her a book. She turned me on to Southern Plains. Half of the book is Southern Plains. Tell Ted that's the part I wrote. I did. I won't have enough time to really get deep into Southern Plains, but it was a game changer for us. We had all the stuff that our Turner had written in all of his diaries, and then all of a sudden we had 45 people that were interviewed that were providing affidavits, providing sworn testimony as to whether or not Edward Carter Turner was ever or anything. Because he, when everybody else voted to secede from the Union, I didn't say to succeed, which is when everybody else voted, he voted no. It wasn't a no, and it was you voted yes or it was a no vote. And he voted. He was the only one in his group that did that, and he was shunned forever until people got over it and realized that what he stood for was he stood for the union of the United States. And would absolutely speak wisdom to say we're not going to destroy this country. And I kind of think he's a good guy. I think that was the right. If we could see in advance what was going to happen, I think more people would have maybe voted that way. Got a picture up there because she helped me with one other thing. At the time, our children were having some misgivings by the fact that they had a family that were slave owners, that had enslaved people in our history. And therefore, they're not really interested in our history. All the books that were given, they don't really want to talk about it. And I'm struggling with that. That's not good. We've got to do something so that people can learn what happened. And that's in all things. We can't erase history. And so Karen said something to me that was a little bit life-changing for me. She said sometimes we have to look at things through a different lens. Sometimes we have to look through it through the lens that they were looking through, rather than the one that we're looking through now. If we apply we all in the room say slavery is horrible, it's a horrible thing. I don't even want to talk about it, it's so bad. But if we don't talk about it, we're destined to repeat mistakes. There's still slavery. We have to understand. She taught me about looking at something through a different lens. And I'm in the process of writing a book right now where instead of using chapters, I'm using lenses. So that I can say that rather than magnifying things to make them look closer, let's magnify ideas that make them more understandable by using the different lenses. So thank you for that. It helped me a lot. So I have no idea where I'm at on time. But I got something I want to do. And that might mean that I shut up just a little while. But I'm so thankful that this organization has the funding and the expertise. And this wonderful man sitting in the back that has the technology to fulfill this idea, this concept of know their names, of realizing that all we have to go on is their first names. If they had a last name, more than likely it would have been Turner, or it would have been to whatever plantation enslaved workers were working on. But they would have their first names. And then we find out through your project, through lots of other projects like that, that if we find little threads that we can wind together, all of a sudden, maybe we can provide. I'm sitting there today talking about my family history with the Quakers and all this family history that we have with some of our founders, some of the richest people that came to America. Got lots of history. We can't digest it, we have so much. But there was folks that descended from enslaved people that barely know their name, don't know their history. And if we can do something to help with that, I think it means a lot. In the book, there's 38 names of people that were enslaved. We've got to count that there were maybe 100 slaves that were at Kinloch. But we have 38 that are mentioned by name. And I wanted to bring up the fact that they're referred to as hands. Sometimes slaves, sometimes servants. Servants typically meant they were working inside of the house. And I looked up why they were referred to as hands, by the way. I never knew it. It had to do, it was used loosely, I can tell, but it was a grading system for just how a young person would count maybe as a full hand, or maybe multiple hands, maybe because of their power that went, as opposed to old Moses, who maybe didn't count but maybe half a hand. And that was one way of saying how many hands you have, how much manpower or person power you have here. I had a bunch of these. I decided it just enough of that maybe, but when you read this, if you read it critically, you start to learn how to see the difference. You see that, I mean, even if I didn't diary, I turned my fattened muttons out to grass. I had to look it up. Everybody know what a mutton is? Old sheep. That maybe are being fattened for meat rather than for wool production. As compared to, I kill the lamb for the table. So mutton for the people. By the way, that's where I got the W. I felt like, let's talk about that. I kill the lamb at the table. Everybody's had lamb chops opposed to, I don't know if I've ever had mutton. Probably. I snuck it in. So I'm going to do something. With your indulgence, and we can open up some conversations if you want to. I want to read your names. Is everybody okay with it?
Yes. What are the numbers in the book?
Numbers are the page numbers in the book. They're referenced.
You feel
I'm
back
sorry.
to Alfred? You go back for a second.
If it's for me, tell them. I forgot your name. Is it Troy? Is it?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't forget. But it's not Tomas. He and I already talked about the fact that you have the book, you have those 38 names. Sometimes they're mentioned a lot. And when you go look for it, you can see that old Moses, at the last Saturday of every month, was allowed to leave Kinloch and go to another farm and visit his wife. But you can learn from this, even when it hits you a little bit and it feels bad. But let's read. Troy, I challenge you, but look at every one of his references and see if you can. Sometimes it's just drove the wagon in Alexandria, but sometimes it's meaningful. Interesting names, by the way. One group that have a last name. I should mention that Edward Turner traveled around looking at where he could lease or rent enslaved people to make up for what he was going to have in his harvest. Everybody else was doing it too. A lot of the African slaves that were brought into Virginia were sold for a big profit and moved down to Louisiana and down to the cotton gold Delta states. When you see a last name like that, in my opinion, and you're all the scholars of it, I'm thinking they were from some other plantation, probably the Coleman plantation or something, and it was a family that had that name. Does anybody in the room know different than that? Yeah, yes. It's the only one I put a note on. I question myself whether it was known or not, but ultimately, this was a special person in the Turner's life. She's buried with the family in the Kinloch Cemetery. The Southern claim she was interviewed. One of the affidavits is from her. I was going to play the harmonica while it was going on, but I think it's a bit much. It's nearly 200 years. And it would be their deep that this would happen. They'd be honored. Hopefully with respect. I feel a little silly sometimes, but I feel a little torn in it. And I think reading their names or seeing their names is meaningful. They're being honored. They built Kinloch. They built They built Selby. They built this country. And the choice. If Carter Turner did us a favor, he called him by name and gave us information about whether they had children, who their parents were, you know what time they were living and working, you know the fact that old Moses made everybody's shoes, and that was a carpenter. Page was an overseer. One point in time, wasn't working out, or doing other things, and when the overseer, the white overseer was unable to perform his duties, they stepped into their role and did a great job. So, I think it's important. Thanks for what we got. Now I'll still close. We did 4 different publishing companies, and Lisa and I got more of these books around because these are all the proof copies that have something wrong with them or something until we figure it out. Book Baby, I think they ought to change their name. But it's okay. But that's who ended up publishing our book, and these books, well, they're not cheap. They're a lot of work went into it, for one thing, but they're made beautiful. And if you go to our website, and there's a link to it, you can go to Book Baby and look it up. And if you say, gee, I don't know, $60 an awful lot of money to pay for a book, I would tell you that number one, it's worth it. But number two, half of it, consider a donation to the Tomas Turner Association of Virginia, because we were able to collect the money. Thank you. If time allows, Mary, we could have maybe a few comments or whatever. Questions aren't allowed. Georgia.
So, Andy, you have a number of people up there whose names show that they were mentioned many times.
Yes.
Can you give us a sort of a picture of 2 or 3 of those people? How old were they? What did they do? Why were they being mentioned all the time?
Yes. I did a little bit of that with old Moses because he was mentioned more than anyone, because he was the head of carpentry. He built their wagons. He didn't fix them. They built them from scratch. He was a craftsman. I don't know a lot by heart. Would you like me to look at just a reference?
Just what kind of...
Yeah, I can.
For people who Turner recognized as having a role, and can you just describe some of those roles?
Well, so some of them, every day, I mentioned it earlier, were drivers in the wagons. Because he knew that he could send them to Alexandria, and I researched this a little bit more. Dad and I talked about it a little bit. There weren't really a lot of cash. Nobody's carrying cash, but they knew where to go. They knew the people, and they made those regular runs all the time. There were other people that had particular skills in the fields that no one else had. That they understood how to build fences or whatever. And you can see references made that so-and-so is working back on the backfield, repairing the fence today or whatever. And they had servants. They had people that worked in the house. we provided help. Other comments or questions? Yes.
Edward lived at Kinloch after the Civil War.
A brief time.
A brief time.
When Sarah died,
Okay.
after they had their children, and it was it timing-wise, she died after the Civil War or before, do you know?
I think right at the end.
Right at the end. And he was heartbroken, and so he moved to Montrose.
So I was supposed to ask, after the Civil War, how did things fare? What happened to him that he was enslaved people? Do we know?
There's mention of the fact that there's not a lot, because we don't, at some point those diaries drop off, we don't get a lot of posts. But we have some knowledge that these, I guess we have to remember sometimes is they weren't come off a ship from Africa and purchased and put to work in Virginia. They and their parents were born into slavery. And so when the Emancipation Proclamation happened and they had their freedom, they didn't leave. There's evidence that where are they going to go? What would they do that's any different than what they've been doing? And I don't want to even come close to trying to say that Kinloch was a better place than another place would be. I don't think it could be good, but it might have been a place where it was easier to stay.
Familiar.
Yeah, familiar. And so other things to share?
This isn't all involved. Have you ever heard of a man named James Friend?
James Friend?
Friend.
No.
W-R-E-N. He was an architect who was active in the second half of the 1700s and first 2 decades of the 1800s. He was on the Fauquier Church, the Christ Church in Alexandria, Paul's Church, Johnson Hall, Mason's house, and Fairfax County Courthouse, a building was still used by the county court system now. His mother was a Turner, and there was King George. And I don't know how they're related to the people who built Kinloch, but probably reasonably close.
We can find out so quickly and make headstand because we got 11,000 members.
I'm just the 4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, but that's our wonderful John Marshall who just left us now would have jumped all over that. And he would have gotten her email address and sent it to you tonight and said, this is everything that I found. We're not going to do. We're struggling a little bit with how we're going to carry forward with that. We think we're going to find somebody else.
Was the Southern Plains successful?
Southern Plains was successful. Thank you. I ran out of time. I knew that was going to happen. But Southern Plains was a 9-year effort. Think about this. Congress passed a law that will give people their money back for stuff that we stole from them during the war as long as they weren't Confederate. So I got approved. It took 9 years. It didn't really take 9 years to do it. It was 9 years before it was done. Mr. Ware and Mr. Richards, 2 attorneys, interviewed 45 witnesses. Imagine dying and finding out later on that somebody, there's 45 people that got interviewed. And said, what's your character? What kind of a person? I'm not the devil character indicted. His claim was for $6,338. When he wrote about what they were doing on his property, he was mad about it. He was so upset. They were just coming in and steal everything. $6,338 equals $165,000 in today's dollars. He received $3,329. And as a result of the fact that 2 or 3 of the horses that he says were stolen, somebody disputed it. And so it was an easy one to just cross off the list. But it was an amazing thing, and I wouldn't know anything about it had I not spoken to Karen. So it's a good thing.
I have a question. I haven't read the diary in a while, so I don't remember, but during the Civil War, Edward wrote a lovely little statement about how he felt about the government. Do you remember that by any chance?
Yep, but not well enough to quote it, but I will tell you that he spoke, people were saying that bad things about it before they voted for secession. And so he did write a section that very, very poetically described what he felt was wrong with, seceding from the Union and breaking this country up, and that he was willing to put his name on it, that I will never vote for that. And recognize this, okay, I won't be able to come up with the names right, but somebody can help me. His brother was a rear admiral for the Union. He was the person who was on Ironsides at Fort Sumter.
Thomas Turner, of all things. Admiral Thomas Turner, yes.
Spelled with an H.
Yes.
And his other brother, we'll say Harry Smith, but I mean, no.
Yes, Harry Smith Turner. Yes.
Harry Smith Turner. This guy wrote diaries just like Edward Carter Turner. There's a book that has his diaries in it. Not as good as that, but it's good. And this guy was sent to France to study cavalry horseback warfare, and for the specific reason for him and two people he went with to come back and write the training manuals for the Union cavalry officers to learn from. He, I don't remember the general's name right now, but he went to California in the 1800s when there was no road. And on his way back, the Donner Party, he came, this is a cavalry officer who's leading men through Donner's Pass when the snow was melting, and saw what had happened, all of the remaining bodies that were there, and in order to have them buried. It's the Turner, Edward Carter's brother. What a family. Great family.
But in the Southern Plains, he got that payment because he was not a Confederate.
He had very much that. He had that.
Is that correct?
It is correct. He got that because, but he would tell you, I'm not a Confederate. But I'm also not, I'm not taking either side in this thing.
But the 45 people who testified, the Southern Plains people concluded that he should be compensated because he was not a part of
the term of knowledge would be he was a Union man. Yeah. He didn't want to be a Union man.
I got it.
May I help answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to talk in.
You take the camera. Make sure I look good. No, that's you. Good question. 45, 48 people interviewed, sworn testimony. There were various different aspects of the questioning back and forth, and there were witnesses, and then there were rebuttals, and Edward Carter Turner himself was empowered to interrogate the witnesses, especially the hostile ones who told lies about him. His feelings on secession, he had earlier made very clear in the diary that a bunch of radical hotheads in South Carolina had told lies saying, oh, the northern states won't bother you, they won't invade, they'll let you do your own thing, it will be peaceful, and he lists all the lies that the hotheads told in and bully Virginia into seceding. And he wouldn't have it. What he said was that it was inconceivable that Virginia withdraw from the Union, which she had offered so much to build with all of the first presidents and Thomas Jefferson and so forth. It was inconceivable to him. And then in terms of the testimony, it was about 43 in favor of his loyalty to the Union and 2 or 3 against. And one said, well, I reckon he spoke one way when he was with Confederates and another way when he was with Unions. Essentially, people thought that he sort of waffled a little bit. But it was sworn testimony, and he got to rebut. And then the people who made the judgment discounted the testimony against him because, first of all, it was a minority, like 3 people, and second of all, they were impeached. Their character was known by other people to be bad. And if I may, I'd like to say one other thing about the diary. What we have is very partial. Everything was torn up, stolen, burned, missing, destroyed. And so we have 1839, 40, 41, 1850, I think, more or less complete. And then a portion of 62 and 63. And is gripping reading. So anyway, Andy, thank you.
Got a quick question from the live stream. Someone was wondering if there are any summaries written about the enslaved people who are referenced there as to like their lives or anything, or not just like excerpts.
There's excerpts from these diaries. There's some in our agenda, that some things that very loosely put together. That work is something we're looking for you to get involved in pretty soon. And we're going to find out names. All right. Let's finish here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.